Hello folks, welcome to this session. My name is Nyumanya and it's yet another session which we want to continue from where we left. And today, in our today's session, I'm going to introduce CSS. And CSS is a styling language known as cascading style sheet. In the last tutorial or in the last session, we had a conclusion of HTML Crash Course, and that's where we had an introduction to CSS. And today we want to build more on CSS, and we will be having less HTML to handle in that matter. So this gave us an introduction to CSS and what we expect. So in today we are going to sink into CSS in full depth. So just to begin with, this is what we had. This is what we had, and our index.html. We are going to clear everything we have in the Windows page. So I'm going to clear everything, and after clearing everything, I'll also clear any style sheet connected, and after that, I'll create a new CSS page. So after doing that, I'll start on a new page after refreshing my browser. It seems my CSS is still connected. What I need to do is to remove this color I have on the body. After that, I'm going to create a new document. I'm going to create a new document which will be a purely CSS document, and I'll have a new page. Here I will be name it style.css. So just to save, and I do name it style.css. So after naming that style.css, then I can just create a simple HTML document here. I can create a simple HTML element. So I'll have just a paragraph and dummy text. Let me see if it will give me that. I want to look for some dummy text so that we can at least style something. So I'll just come and copy this one here. And for that matter, we have some dummy text inside HTML. So that's the dummy text is unstyled, and in that matter, it doesn't have any styling in it. So I'll just come to my CSS style sheet, style.css. The first thing is normally to connect the style sheet. And to connect the style sheet, I'll come here and use link. And if you're using, we have the IntelliSense, it will give me this. And the href, since style.css lies in the same directory as index.html, I'll just write in the href style.css. And just now I have my style sheet connected. And if I want to test my style sheet, I'll come and write body attribute. Then I'll call it I want only the background color, and the background color, this is a property. I'll give it a property of background color of light. Let me say background color of green. If I give it a background color of green, then we have a semicolon. So body, this is a tag. Yes, so I'll show you how to handle a tag, how to handle a class, and how to handle an ID. So body we have a background color of green, and save, it must end in a semicolon. That's a thumb rule you should have in mind. And if I do refresh, then you can see the body is green. That means that my CSS style sheet is connected. So I'll just come back to CSS, to my CSS style sheet, and clear that. I won't give the body any styling for now. I want to give the entire body any styling for now. So I'll come to my paragraph. I want to have this paragraph inside a div. If I have a div tag here, I can place all this paragraph inside a div. I can place all this paragraph inside a div, that, and if I have them inside a div, I can give this in CSS styling. We normally have something called class. This class is where we do write classes which we can use to style this element. We call this as an element. And we also have ID. So for class, I can just give this this element any class name. You can give it any class name of choice. So I just say my dummy. Let me say my dummy, whichever it will be. So after saving, I'll come to my style.css. Then I'll begin with a dot my dummy. If I write dot my dummy, CSS will recognize this as a class if it starts with dot, and a parenthesis or a bracket. Then I can write any property. I can give it a styling, and for the first I'll have a property. And I can say I want everything to under my dummy color. That's the spelling of the color we're using here. The color, I want it to be blue. Yes, and have a semicolon at the end. So if I go back to the browser and refresh, then you can see my dummy color blue. Yes, I can also change my dummy font size. I come to my CSS, then I say my dummy font size, I want it to be 16 pixels. I'll explain the difference, the measurement units used. And we have 14 pixels ending in a semicolon. Then we refresh, then you can see my dummy 14 pixels. We have an error somewhere. Font size 16 pixels. It seems it's already 16 pixels, and I have to use more font size than 16 pixels. If you can see, check my dummy here, you can see that it occupies the entire space. I want it to have a border so that we can identify where my dummy starts and where it ends. So I'll just come here and write my under my dummy, I give it a property border, and if I give it a border, I want the border must have some line. That line we normally have around a border, we can give it some weight, line weight. Line weight is how thick that line is, and I want it to be 2 pixel thick. Yes. After giving it a border of 2 pixel, I want the border to be red, then semicolon. 2 pixel red, and I want the border, I want it to be, we normally have the border can be hyphenated, the border can be solid. Yes, so I need that border to be solid. So the order is normally something like 2 pixel solid, red. 2 pixel solid red. So solid means that there will be a visible line around the border. Red shows the color of that visible line, and 2 pixel gives you the weight of that line. We can have it as solid, we can have it as hyphenated or dotted, depending on the kind of border you want to use. And in most cases, it's normally solid border. If we give the border of 2 pixel, let me just refresh so that you can see the change as I continue. Now you can see the border as 2 pixel thick. And if I increase the fatness to, let me say, 8 pixels, then you'll see the line weight will increase. So if I add it to 8 pixel, then you can see the thickness of this line increases. So just to be standard, we'll have it back to 2 pixel. And let me try changing this to dotted. If there is the 2 pixel dotted red. So if I come back to my browser and refresh, then you can see 2 pixel dotted red. So there are some times you will need a dotted, you will need a solid, and the others. So I can give you that assignment to go and look for the other border styles, other line styles. It's a normal line style. Yes, yeah. So we come back here. I'll return it back to solid. Now in my border, I've already placed a border. After placing a border around my element, I call what's inside here an element. So I want to define this element. So this is the element. This element is inside a p tag or a paragraph. The space immediately after the element, we call it a padding. Yes. So the space immediately after the element, but between the border and the element, is called a padding. The space outside this border, we call it a margin. Yes, so the space outside, we call it a margin. So when we need a space around this element, we normally come here and we say padding. If we say padding, and we give it 5 pixels, we give it a padding of 5 pixels. So after giving it a padding of 5 pixels, then when I refresh, you can see a space of 5 pixels left all round. If we need a space after this, meaning it will be between this border and the next element border, then that will call it a margin. If we need this element to have some space between it and the next element. So if we can have a padding of 5 pixels, another thing we can normally describe is we have 4 measurements, and the first measurement we call this side left, and we call this side right. We call this top, and we call this bottom. If you want to define a property which will be using this, then we will call it something like padding top, and this padding bottom, padding right, and padding left. So I want to define also the width so that we don't want our element to occupy the whole width. So I'll come to my CSS and say that width, those are properties, width, and the width to be, we can define the width in pixels, we can define the width in RAM, we can define the width in EM, we can define the width in VW, that's vertical width, and we can define the width in percentage. Yes. We normally have something called absolute measurements and relative measurements. Yes. Assignment for you, go check what's absolute measurement and relative measurement. Absolute measurements, I can say relative measurements takes the measurement of that container while absolute measurements, they are independent measurement of that element. So when we say that the width is measured in pixels, then we can say that that width will be in it's a measured width, meaning that if we change this container, now we are using, let's say, a large device screen. If you're using a large device screen and you transfer that same project to a small device screen, there will be some changes in width. It will measure that width relative to the width of that device. So in this case, I want you to be using, mostly if you are making width of containers, of width of elements, we normally use percentage. So if we have this entire screen, we normally have it as 100%. And we can reduce the percentage such that we only need this element to occupy a certain percentage. So I can give it that I need the width to be 80%. To be 80%. And note that you should have a semicolon at the end. And after having it as 80%, then if we save and refresh, then you can see this 80%. We have it as 80%, but it's not centered. If you want to center this element, I want to call it container from now, because it's a container containing elements. If we want to center this container, then we can normally use margin. I said that margin is the space outside margin is the space outside the element or outside the container. So we can define the margin. If we only use margin, then that margin we said will be applied to both margin left, margin top, margin bottom, and margin right. So we have both margin top, left, right, and bottom. So if we want this element or this container to move to this other side, we will push it by having a margin left. So we can say some margin left of, let's say, 15 pixels. Let's try that. Let me try margin left. Margin left. I can give it 20 pixels. Margin left of 20 pixels. So on refresh, then you can see it has moved by 20 pixels. 20 pixels is a very small measurement. So we can, in CSS, I can say it's normally trial and error. You try, then you test, trial, test, trial and test. You can see 20 pixel is small. So let's try double the 20 pixel to 40 pixels. If you do 40 pixels, then you can see how big or how small 40 pixels is. So that's how we can push it. This other side, we can also push it. This measurement, I want to say that this measurement, we call it as positive 40 pixels, but we can also have it as a negative. Note that if you check this end, if we move it by 40 pixels, then it will move this other side. What about this other side? If you want to move it this other side using margin right. If you want to move it using margin right, then we move it with negative, right? But don't be used to using negatives. Use positive integers. Yeah, negatives, there are times which you can use negatives, but if you are in position of using positives, you can use that positive. Let me move this. Let me just define some margin top so as to move this container down. So I'll come here and give it first. Let me have it on top here. Margin. It's margin top, not top margin, right? So margin hyphen top colon. Then let me give it 100 pixels. 100 pixels. So you can see that pixel is a defined measurement. Yes, I can say it's an independent measurement. So margin top which is 100 pixels. I didn't write this correct spelling of margin. So let me save that and have refresh. You can see 100, how big 100 pixels is. Suppose if we turn our measurements or we change these measurements we are talking about here to percentage, then there will be a big difference. A percentage, it gives the best percentage relative to the entire page we have. So this entire page is 100%. This is 100%. So when you say margin left is 80%, then count 80% from here. The whole of it is 100%. So meaning that this container will move up to here because 80% will be from here to here. So to around here. So don't be using percentage while defining elements such as margins. So I did say that this process is a process of trial and error, meaning that you'll be trying in order to center this element. You want to center this element, you are pushing it this side, you see it's not yet, you are giving gazing measurements while pushing it. In order to avoid that and to make your work easier, I will come here. If I come here, I can define one measurement which will be used for all margins. If I'm unless for defined margins, so I can just come here, margin. I don't want to care whether it's left, right, or bottom. I'll only give margin. Then colon. Then I give it as margin auto. So if I give it margin auto, auto is one also of the one of the measurements we normally use. If it says a defined measurement, we want it to be done automatically for us. So margin auto, it will align or center this. Let's see. You can see it has centered the entire container. So that's margin auto. It will take this, whatever it does, we did define the width of this container. So if we did define the width of this container, we have the remaining 20% because this container we did give it as 80%. So the remaining 20%, what auto does is that it splits the remaining 20% to both margin left and margin right so that they are equal. Yes, so that's how margin auto works. So we have that as our uh, our container with element. There are a lot of properties we can define in CSS, and this is how we define properties. Any web page you will see, this is how properties are defined. So we normally have color, font size. We also have background color. So background color. We also have background, anything to do with background, image or background color. We don't have a semicolon there. Background, image, background, image. Then we can close with a semicolon. Background, repeat, background, background, position, background. Let's see another one in the background. You can see all of them. Background, we only have background. So I want to define these properties. Background color is the color we want in the background. Yes. So if we want any color in the background, let's say we want the color to be light blue. I can normally come here and say light blue. I don't know whether it should have some hyphen somewhere. So it means it's right. So if I refresh, then you can see the background of this element is light blue. If we want the background to be an image, then we normally come here and write URL that. So if you have URL, then we can write where our image is located. For instance, our image, we have some images here and we have it Google as PNG. So I'll just come, it's in the root directory, then I write google.png. google.png. So when I refresh, let me just disable this. If you want to uncomment in CSS, this is how you uncomment. You open and you close and save. If I refresh, then it has disappeared. So you should write the correct directory to your image. So our image is under images, then that, and I will remove that. A dot, then this slash means that you are starting from the root, then you are getting to the first directory. So if you want to take it from the root, this is what we normally do. But for now, it's equally doing or removing that dot and slash, because it's only one folder after the root. So we can do that, and we refresh. Then it's not yet. I've not given the correct name. So images google.jpeg. Yes, jpeg save is google.jpeg. Let me see. Then you can see my Google image. So I controlled the width. You can control the width and the height. That's why my image is not appearing well. So I can control this image so that it fits this container, and I need it here. So you'll find that when the image is usually small, we'll have those image repeated in order to fill this container. So we can have that image here, some image here, some image here. So in order to control that, so that we only have one image in the background, instead of the image repeating itself, we come and say background repeat, na repeat. Background repeat, no repeat. Then even if the image is small, the image will be zoomed so that it can fit this let me say container. It can fit that container, because if you have a smaller image in size, it will be let me say the image ends here, the same image will repeat here, the same image will repeat, the same image will repeat. So if you want that one image now to fill the entire container so that it can zoom and fill the entire container, then we normally come here and say background repeat, no repeat. We can also control where we want that background to be. Yes, so if we want that background to be maybe in we want that background, we have this container here. This container, it has positions. So we have the top, left, bottom, and top, left, bottom, and right. Yes. So if this image is normally small, you will find that the image, if you want to control where that image appears, we can say that we need that image on top, we need that image in the background but on bottom, we need that image in the background but on the left hand side. So that's how we control the background position, and we can say left. Yes, we can say background position. Let me just return that. Right. We can say background position top. We can say background position bottom. If we use background, then it means we can use both URL, and we can use both an image, and we can use both color. Yes, so I just highlighted this color so that we don't have both the color and the image. So background position, I've explained that. Let me just have it as bottom. Background, if you just use background without defining whether it's a background color or a background image, then what it means is that our background can either be a URL, whether an image, or it can either be a color. If we need that background to be a color, then we only write that color, that we need background green. We say we need only background green and end it with a semicolon. Then if we need it to be an image, then we'll write URL inside brackets, then we give the link to the directory where that image is. Then we define whether we want it to be repeated, where we want the position is, but this is not necessary if you use no repeat. If you want it to repeat, then you can say repeat. You can just say repeat. If you want it to repeat along the x-axis, if we have a grid, then you know that this is y-axis, then this is x-axis, then we normally also have the z-axis. So x-axis is horizontal, y-axis is vertical, then the z-axis, it's like a diagonal. So if you want this to be on the x-axis, that's where we do say that background repeat along which axis. Then you'll find that this image will be repeated. If we have this image ending here, it will be repeated along this axis. If you want to be repeated on a horizontal way or in a x-axis, then you'll find that the background image will be repeated along this axis. Because this is a planar, it's a plane object, or I can say a planar object, we don't have the z axis. Or a 2D, let me use the 2D. This is not a 3D, it's a 2D, so we will only have two axes in that for that matter. We have a lot of properties, and just in the color, before I go far, in the colors, we have formats for giving colors, and one of the formats we call RGB, color code. So I'll just remove this green and write RGB. So RGB means the color ratio between the red color, the green color, and the blue color. The ratio starts from 0 up to 255. Yes? So our color ratio starts from 0 to 255. So we normally give the ratio of red color from 0 to 255. Then we give the ratio of the green color from 1 up to 250, from 0 up to 255, and we can also have it as 254. Then we normally have the ratio of the blue color from 1 up to 255, where we can have let me say 12. Yes, that's how it normally go. Should we have apostrophe? I'm forgetting some facts. Yes, that's how it should be. So red, green, and blue, you can see it's a bit blue, it's a bit greenish, because the ratio of the green color is more than all the colors. So you can just play around with these colors. You say that the ratio of red, green, and blue is that. If you see that green is too much, you can reduce it to 114, and this you can raise red to around 102, and leave this as, let me say, 75. The red, green, blue ratio, that. Then if you refresh, then you can see the color it gives you. This color, you can play around with colors, anything to do with color, whether you are using this colors blue, then you're using this color as RGB. So you can play around with colors. If you want the color to be on the background, or you want the color to be on the border, or you want the color to be anywhere you want a color, such that you see this, we've written solid 2 pixels solid red, we can replace this red with this RGB, then it will work. That's how we do. The default one, I say the RGB starts from 0, 0, 0 to 255, 255. And guess what? Color 0, 0, 0 is a very obvious color, which is black. Color 0, 0, 0 is black, which you should have in your fingertips. Then color RGB 255, 255, 255 is normally color, and guess what? Is a color that you know. The opposite of black is white. It's pure white. So that's RGB. We have also a color code in RGB. We can also have one called RGBA. So let me just have another property with background so that I can have it better. Background, I can also have RGBA. RGBA meaning that if we have this ratio to 55 to 55 to 55, we want to play around with this ratio to 55 to 55 to 55 so that it gives what it gives us if we have an A. Let me just copy that here and paste it here. So the value of A starts from 0 to 1. Yes, the value of A starts from 0 to 1. So meaning it can be from 0.1 to 0, from 0.0 to 1.0. So add the value of A to be 0.5. If the value of A is 0.5, then if I refresh, oh, it was white. The color was white. I want to change it to another color, which is very visible. Let me change this to 25, and let me change this to 180, and let me change this to 243. So we have the red value, green value, blue value, and the value of A. I've just forgotten the name of A in what A means in full. Just excuse me for that. Yeah. Should we have a comma? Should we have a comma? So it's just a trial and check, trial and check, trial and check. So the value of A means you want to give it a ratio. Yeah. So if the value of A is 0, then it means that that color will be invisible. If we did say that we want color green, then that color is invisible. If we want to say that the value of A is 1, then that color will be very bright. If we give the color of A to be 0.9, then the brightness of that color will reduce. If we give the value of A to be 0.2, that value of that color will reduce in brightness. So A controls the brightness of that color how we want it to be. So we have a lot of properties that we can define in CSS, and apart from only the colors. So in the next session, I'll be defining other properties which are very important. I did say that in color, we can use the colors red, or we can use the colors RGB value. We also have a color value called the X code. And the X code is a familiar one. You've seen them, that a color that starts with hash. After hash, we have a 0. We have a value like 0, then A, 0, A, 0, 2. Let me say, I don't know which one will be right, but let me give a value which I know, that FFF. So the color FFF, that's an X code of a certain color, and this is color white. So we can give it as double F or X 6 times. The RGB value maximum value is normally 6. I can say 6 characters. That's the maximum value a hex code can have. So the color FFF is normally white, while hash 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 6 zeros is normally color black. So defining colors in hex code and defining colors, you should know how to define a color in RGB value and how to define a color in hex code. So if you don't know the X code of a color, you can use you can use Google to define or to find the color codes of that color you're working with. But it's highly recommended that you do use colors in hex value. These are hex value of a color, and we have this as an RGB value of a color. And in the next session, I'll explain more about this A, which I've just said I've forgotten how to work with it, but that's the concept which I've given you, and I'll explain much on finding the hex codes of colors. So if you're working with the hex code, it must start with a hash, then the maximum characters must be 6. The minimum can be 3. So minimum is 3, maximum is 6. So 6 means that these two, the first two stands for the red, the second two stands for the green value, the third two stands for the blue value. So the red, green, and blue color, as those are the primary colors in the coloring or in the colors system. So thank you for watching. Let's meet in the next session, and I'll hope that we'll discuss more on CSS. And this is just a beginning. You can explore more on more properties. We have a very many properties. So, and I did say this is not allowed. Whatever I've done here is not allowed. The last property defined should be ended in a semicolon. Yes, and this class my dummy, which we define by having a period. You call it a full stop, but the correct name is a period. So the period, then my dummy, this the CSS styling will know that this is a class. So let's meet in the next session. You can find more, and see you.